Hello and welcome along to another episode of the Tackling Sport podcast and a weekend review. Finally, Sean, welcome to the show. Sean Hussey, as always, Dan here.
Hey Dan, how's it going?
Not too bad, not too bad. Sorry, I'm actually a bit under pressure there. I kind of made a mess of that intro, but we're under a strict time limit here today. So we've gone US PGA golf, 8 o'clock to 8:20. And we have the Premier League final day, 8:20 to 8:40. And we've got the Allianz National Leagues, 8:40 to 9. So Sean, let's get straight into the golf. What's your first take on that? Where do we start other than Phil Mickelson? What an absolutely incredible achievement. And I'm saying this out loud again, the oldest ever major champion.
Yeah, no, it was a special week. That's probably off the back of or other than maybe a Masters. It's probably the most memorable major for quite some time. I think, it's not often that you remember a golf course. I'd safely say it's in the bracket of a Pebble Beach or a Torrey Pines, or maybe a Bethpage Black, where the golf course is ultimately one of the winners as well. And you definitely sense that, the amount of people that were tweeting saying the PGA should be every year at Kiwa Island. I'm sure there'll be a Ryder Cup again there in a couple of years because it just makes so much sense. The golf course had everything, and I think it helped that Phil Mickelson won it because it just made it that extra bit special. And the score he shot in the end, I know he made a couple of bogeys coming down the stretch, but he'd so much in hand that it was a bit of a walk in the park towards the end. But you never know with Phil, and I suppose that's when he did a couple of two shot swings and a couple of holes, Kepka made birdie, things like that. And you're still hoping Phil would do up incredible scenes. And it was a brilliant leaderboard, obviously. For the Irish contingent, having Harrington and Lowry up there. I texted you, Dan, on Saturday evening going, we could have them together. And then Matsuyama three-putted and made bogey, which allowed Harrington and Lowry to play together on the final day. So it just kind of everything was special about the week, especially for an Irish perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll just stick with Phil maybe, and then we'll move on to the Irish guys. Like, to put this into context, like Phil Mickelson hadn't won a major since 2013, and I don't think he had a top 10 since 2016 in a major championship. It's absolutely phenomenal, and he could have kind of sailed in the sunset. I know Nolan Lano kind of made a comparison with Darren Clarke in the sense that he's kind of happy out on the Champions Tour doing his thing, and that was the way Phil Mickelson could have gone. But I know he's kind of on this mad fasting thing, and people kind of take the piss out of him. But the way he's kind of done that fitness regime, bombs and birdies, everyone who follows him on social media, the calves stuff, that sort of thing, you have to have big calves, and it's all a bit of crack. But in the midst of all that, he's really worked hard in this game, and his swing was in his control as ever. And those target lines I thought were amazing at Kiawah Island. And I don't think there's been too much of that coverage in a PGA Tour event or a major before, in the sense that you knew the target line, and the way Phil just managed to bring his shot towards the target line every time, it was as if it was there in real life. It was absolutely incredible, and I'm just absolutely buzzing for him because, like if Brooks, for example, had won that, he'd have got 5 majors, and Phil be looking at him going, Jesus, I've not wasted a career, but I could have got a couple of more majors, where now I feel 6 is the right amount for him. And he's got a game there where, I don't know if I want to get carried away, but he could contend again in the US Open in Torrey Pines in the 24 days, is it?
Yeah, no, I think halfway through the back nine on Sunday, when it was looking like it was a Phil win, my attention's turned to obviously the Grand Slam. And I said to who I was watching with my dad, and I said to him, I'm going, geez, in 3 or 4 weeks, where the US Open's running into town, it's running into San Diego. That's where he's from. He loves Torrey Pines. He's always been very supportive of the the Farmers Insurance Open there that's played at Torrey Pines. It's just everything is kind of written, and I think golf's got a lot of great storylines at the moment. Rory, will he ever get that Grand Slam? You've got Jordan Spieth going for the PGA. You've got Brooks Koepka, who's just this major machine where even if he doesn't win, he's always there. And you've got Phil now, who is going to have 5 more cracks at least at the US Open, which I think is just special, because not only is it such an important and exclusive club for him to get into, but I also think, to win his national championship, to win the US Open, the one that he's been so close in. I mean, you can rattle off the years. I think particularly 2009 probably hurts him a lot at Bethpage, losing to Lucas Glover, who, hasn't really gone on and done anything else. He's probably in that Rich Beam kind of pocket as a one-time major champion, so I think for Phil now, I think he'll know, and I think that'll give him confidence that he can do whatever he wants now in the game, you know. And I think you're right. I think taking him from 5 to 6, I think it, you know, if Brooks Koepka gets to 6, I mean, it'll be an incredible achievement as well. I just think 6 is that next level up, and you know, it's twice what Harrington has, for example. And you just think about how much he's done in the game, Phil. It's incredible. And to be honest, I think, especially with Augusta, you know he's going to compete once more there again. He's just got the skill, and it's a left-handers course. Everyone knows that. Statistically, they do so well there. But I think it's just brilliant. I think it's brilliant for the game of golf. And if it is a swan song, which I don't think it is, what an incredible place to do it, and what an incredible person to bring, I suppose, that energy back to golf, considering the year it's had. In terms, golf's had really good time of it with COVID, probably one of the best sports wise, the best to come out of it. But I think that picture of him up 18 with the crowds walking, I did get a sense like this, the world is turning, the tide is turning at Kiwa, and you know, no one else better than Phil really to have that moment. And it did feel kind of special, and to be a lot of golfers sitting in the locker room there going, you know, that could be me. And I'm sure people like Harrington, who we'll get on to, and other players like Koepka, and even people from afar like Rory and John Ram, thinking, you know, that's the pinnacle of the game, and Phil has got 6 of them now, and it's an incredible achievement, especially to play so often in an era dominated by, you know, your Faldos, your Normans coming towards the end of their career, but you know, Tiger Woods, Ernie Els, guys like this who won a lot of major championships. It's incredible what Phil did, and 30 years on from winning his first PGA Tour event as an amateur, you know, the script couldn't be better written.
Yeah, and obviously his playing partner the first 2 days was Padraig Harrington, and I thought it was absolutely incredible. And what a shock to have him in contention. Like, the fact is, he hasn't had a top 10 since, actually, I'm trying to make it off the top of my head, I think it's 2012. He hasn't had a top 10 on the PGA Tour. That's a major top 10. He hasn't had a top 10 on the PGA Tour since 2016. He's missed 11 of his last 14 major cuts. Hasn't made a cut in a major since 2016 as well. He hasn't qualified for a lot of those majors in the time as well. He's the European Ryder Cup captain this year, and I thought it was kind of funny in the sense that he ended up being, you know, tied first and beating all his team that he's going to end up captain, and now he's had to rule himself out of contending. But for someone like Padraig Harrington, it's not too dissimilar for Phil Mickelson's, in the sense that Harrington's gone about his way during lockdown, kind of teaching us all how all these different golf shots that you need to do. He set up his own YouTube channel, and talk about someone not just saying or coaching you what to do, talking the talk, but being able to back it up. And I thought it was amazing, and it just felt like you're watching the old Padraig Harrington again. It's come out of the blue. It's probably, with like Phil, you feel like it's a little bit more real than Harrington. I don't want to do him a disservice, but I think playing with Shane as well on the final day, it was just absolutely incredible, amazing to watch, and to see those 2 Irish flags on the leaderboard of a major championship, and it must have shown up about 4 or 5 times because they were always just in the top 10, was magic. And for a country of our size, I think the only 3 countries up there were America, South Africa, and Ireland. So it's something we should be proud of, that we don't just have the golf courses here, but we have the players as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with Padraig, you know. But the one thing I would say is there's been a couple of glimpses where he's had a couple of good rounds this year, not too dissimilar to Mickelson, but I think it's for them, it's about, can they get, 3 or 4 good rounds together and piece it all together. And that, I think, is something that maybe Shane has struggled with at times as well. Shane Lowry, even gone back to Bellerive a couple of years ago on the PGA, I think he shot a 75 on day one and really shot himself in the foot, and if he shoots a better score, he's got a real chance of winning that, where Koepka won a couple of years ago. But it was special to see Harrington up there, the chip in, especially because obviously I was following on the shot tracker and we followed him early, and there was a lot of shots, and Shane chipped in for birdie early on. And when I went to Harrington, because I saw the tee shot went there, and I was just like, oh, that's probably it now. That's his major run done. And then he goes and chips in, and all of a sudden, you're like, this could happen. But no, I think it's special to see Harrington up there. You just remember how good he was. I immediately started thinking about 2009 and that 2 weeks back to back, I think it was, at Firestone and Hazeltine, where he was just in contention, and he was up against Tiger and Yang, who won the PGA. But it's, you just remember how good a golfer Padraig Harrington was, and stepped up in big Ryder Cup moments as well. And he's probably, fallen away a little bit in the last 4 or 5 years, and he's struggled at times, and he's probably tried to find extra extra work out of his body with distance off the tee, but he's just incredible. And I don't think I've seen a better ball striking round from him, because he was giving himself a lot of opportunities, missed a couple of big putts, but it does give you that buzz, I think, when there's an Irish person up the top of the leaderboard, and particularly Porrick, when you know it's going to be few or far between. It reminded me, I think it was that Masters in, I think it might have been 2012, when Bubba won, where he was competing and he missed a couple of putts. I remember he missed a birdie putt on 11, and if he gets that and makes a couple more and he shoots a target, but even just to see him up there, it's electric, and I think he's criminally underrated really in Irish sporting people, especially of that decade where he won 3. And if KD Taylor is the sports person of the 2010s, I think Paul Harrington has a major case to be the sports person of the noughties. And like I said, it was electric. And to see him with Shane, and massive week for Shane as well. Let's not forget that. Obviously tied 4, but what it does for him, Ryder Cup points, and what it does for his momentum, because he's not putting well. Everyone knows that. It's been well documented. He's just not putting well. He's not giving himself chances to win golf tournaments, but he's had a couple of good weeks this week, and the Players as well, where he kind of found something on Sunday that got him into the money and into the world ranking points. And he just needs, I think he's going to win between now and the Ryder Cup, because I think one week the putting will just come, and he will. Because he's playing too good at golf. Everyone's saying, you heard Brad Faxon on commentary, all the journalists are saying, a lot of people are saying it in the media. And if he gets his putting right, I mean, he will win again this year. And I think all he needs is a couple of big more finishes, and he'll definitely be on that Ryder Cup team.
Yeah, and I guess the Phil Mickelson scenes I kind of tweeted out saying it reminded me of Tiger Woods in the 2018 Tour Championship and a certain Shane Lowry in the 2019 Open, and those kind of memories. And it felt like it's almost putting Shane's moment on that par. But you said yourself, it was a bit of an unlike Shane performance in the way he kind of hung in there and managed to, and I think that Harrington pairing was massive. I don't know if I could see him kind of contending. And if he was a 6-footer away of setting a 3 under clubhouse on the 18th and being there, but I suppose the Europe Ryder Cup team, well, everyone knows him and Paul Harrington are very close mates. And I know Padraig said it was the most enjoyable round ever he's ever had on a golf course. And he's not one to exaggerate, to be fair to him, that Larry will be so determined to qualify for this Ryder Cup team outright, because while he'll definitely get a captain's pick, I know Harrington said in the media he won't. He'll be so focused on getting that, because he knows how much that'll mean to Padraig Harrington, the fact that he doesn't have to use one of his wild cards on him. And it'll be great, like you said, you mentioned at the start, with crowds coming back in the US PGA. The Ryder Cup is a crowd event. In fairness to them, I don't know if I was completely for cancelling it last year, but it seems that now it's probably worked out well. And it was always on the odds year before 9/11, obviously. So that'll be an amazing event at Whistling Straits. Not too dissimilar to Kiowa Island, but I know Phil Mickelson, again, kind of getting my paths crossed here, but I know the American team are already talking about, will we pick Phil Mickelson or do they not pick Phil Mickelson? Do they let younger players come through? Whereas ourselves, like Shane Lowry could qualify outright, because like that was the US PGA. Forget about the Irish allegiance. He'll probably deserve a wildcard pick based on his performance there in the US PGA, considering the poor European challenge overall from elsewhere on the likes of John Rahm hung in there, but the likes of Rory McIlroy, obviously.
Yeah, well, I think we spoke after Augusta how big a year it is for golf, and especially Irish golf, and for Rory to win a few weeks ago. And I know he didn't play well. He's not playing well at the moment. He just had a phenomenal week at Quail Hollow. With the Olympics, if it goes ahead, I know there's obviously a lot of talk about that, but to have an Open and Olympics all in the 1 year, and how big a year it is for golf, and the Ryder Cup as well, that carrot at the end of it, I think it's a massive year for Shane and Rory. I think for Shane, look, Europe has so few major champions that I think you have to really reward them in a 2-year cycle. But also for Shane, when 2 years comes around or another year comes around, like there's no guarantee that he'll be back in the hunt for the next one. So this has to be massive for him. I think it'd be criminal if he had a career like his and not competed in Ryder Cups. When you see some of the players that are coming along, especially out of the college game, you think of Victor Hovland and John Rahm in the last couple of years. Now, I know Rahm's played no Ryder Cup, but there's a lot more of these golfers coming on the scene. You look at some of the players on the European Tour, people like Matt Wallace, are they're probably going to play in a Ryder Cup sooner rather than later. Matt Fitzpatrick played a couple of years ago, but he'll really be fancying his chances to get in that side on points. You got Lee Westwood at his age. So I think for Shane, it's a massive end to the year. And I think you're dead right. I think that was a very I wouldn't say if it was Shane-like, but certainly Shane of maybe 3 or 4 years ago, before he had the major win, and maybe the kid that you think he might have let some of that get to him. He got a horrendous break on 17 on day 2, and you really kind of were struggling to see where it came. And then he birdied the 18, made a brilliant birdie on 18, then started Saturday, I think, birdied at 1 and 2. So his temperament and his game is probably at an all-time high in the two of them. Everything seems to be going well for Shane on and off the course. So, you know, it is a major year for him. But I definitely think he's going to win, or at least properly compete for a championship, because I think that's what will annoy him about this year. He's had a very typical of Shane's career. He's probably had 2 or 3 really good rounds in a week, and one's just fallen away. I think Wentworth at the end of last year was very similar to that. So all he needs is 4 good rounds because he'll win. And if he just needs a tournament where he's top of the putting stats, and he could win by 4 or 5. He's playing that well at the moment, tee to green, especially off the tee, because that's that's important for Shane's game.
Absolutely. And like you said, putting's the most random part of golf, so it's the easiest thing to fix, or the easiest thing to have a hot week. Whereas if the driving was a problem, we'd have a bigger conversation. About 4 minutes left of our golf chat. I want to focus on Brooks Koepka, because I want to ask you a tough question, because while he's kind of painting himself as a major player and, you know, peaking for majors, and his record backs it up, and the hardest thing is to get yourself into contention. So I don't want to be overly harsh here. He got himself into contention, didn't quite have it, but it still ended up tight second, despite the fact that I thought he had maybe his C or D game there on Sunday, and somehow ended up only 2 shots back, despite some crazy loose shots. But has he been the same player since winning his 4th major? And if you cast your mind back, I think it was in Bethpage, correct me if I'm wrong, the PGA, where he had like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 shot lead, and suddenly bogey after bogey after bogey. And I think maybe DJ made a charge and he ended up winning by 1 or 2. Has he been the same player since? Because I feel that's taken a lot out of him mentally. And I know he's had his injury problems, obviously in the Masters this year, but he's contended since that PGA, and it feels like he's fallen away at the 2019. You know, there's been a few kind of events where I thought, you know what, he could have got it done there. Has he lost a little bit of that, you know, 1% that, you know, made him so good at majors, where now I think he's kind of just, when he gets there, he's just not able to kick on? Because go back to his round yesterday, the double bogey on 2 was pretty unforgivable. I know he got a bad lie, but I think he played the par 5s in the front 9 in 3 over. Yeah,
it might be the US Open a Pebble with Gary Woodland a couple of years ago. Is that the one I'm thinking of, where he was in charge? The thing with Brooks is, I don't think there's any golfer in the world that
I'm thinking of the one where he ended up, he still won it, but DJ made that charge and he hung on. The one where I think he had the 8-shot lead in the PGA, his last major, and he ended up he almost threw it away. Do you know what I mean? So he still won it, but I got the sense that since then he hasn't. That kind of scarred him, because he did choke, albeit he had such a big lead that he hung on.
No, I think with Koepka, I think there's no other player in the world that would have been where he was this week with his injuries. I think you have to take that into account, how golfers struggle so often with their injuries and what he's done in the last couple of majors. The one thing I would say is, you know, he's lost to Phil this week, and he lost to Tiger at Augusta. And I think if there was one, I think that kind of not haunted him, but I think the one he definitely feels he let go, I think, is Augusta in 2019 when Tiger won. You know, he made that he put in the water at 12, went on 13 and made an eagle. I just think with him, his long iron play at times when he turns it on is as good as I think I've ever seen, really. I'd class him in that kind of Tiger elite level, where he gets a 4-iron in his hand on a big par 4 or a par 5, and you just think eagle with Brooks. So no, I don't think you can really hold him to it, because the injuries, like I said, I don't think any golfer in the world would have competed the way he did with his injuries. And I think, you know, he's clearly not happy with his body. I'm sure he's going to rest up for a couple of weeks and go again at Torrey Pines. But I definitely think he's going to win more majors. He's that good. He's got that mentality. Like, he kind of let it go, but he wasn't playing his A game. He wasn't even playing his B or C game. He's really struggling at the moment. You could tell he struggled on the greens. I've never seen him struggle that much, even though he made some clutch par putts and stuff. But no, there's no golfer in the world that would have competed with his injuries. So
Yeah, and just as you mentioned, in 30 seconds, just to wrap up the takes on Brooks, I guess if he had won the 2019 Masters and the 2021 US PGA and denied Tiger his comeback and Phil his comeback, he'd probably be the most hated player on golf with 6 majors. So it's amazing how that's worked. And I often wonder, Brooks seeing the reaction Phil got. I don't know if that kind of, because he's won as nearly as one major less than Phil. I don't know. Brooks wouldn't have got people running behind him on 18. I don't know if that bothers him or not, but I guess that's the wrap up of the golf there. Bang on the 20-minute mark, and let's move on to the Premier League finalization. And in fairness, it lived up to the billing from a season that was petering out. Liverpool went on to win 8 of their last 10 games, drawing the other 2. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. And well, you said yourself they wouldn't have lost like 5 or 6 games in a row at Anfield behind closed doors. They somehow managed to, it was very Liverpool-like, or the new Liverpool, the way they've dug out. And somehow you look at the table and they've ended up finishing 3rd. Maybe focus on Liverpool to start with, and we'll move on to a couple other teams. But what they've done in that last 10 games, was it a case that Jurgen Klopp's just galvanised them, and the momentum they now have going forward for next season is definitely a title challenge?
Yeah, I think it depends in the summer what happens and how Van Dijk's injury heals, because an ACL is a very difficult injury to come back from. And I think people have proven that in the past. And even if, you look at some examples, certainly off the top of my head, I look at Hector Bellerin at Arsenal, and he hasn't come back the same from his ACL injury suffered. And it does take a while to get back up and running. But obviously Virgil van Dijk was such an elite level defender before it. I think with Liverpool, I definitely think they probably need a couple of more in a few areas. It is a difficult one for Klopp, because Wijnaldum's the first big player that Liverpool era to go, that Champions League, that Premier League winning team to go. And I do feel like they have to, I know they brought in Thiago, but they have to kind of manage that well as well, because it's the first player gone at that team. And when teams break up, it's very hard to build second and third teams. And that's obviously what the great managers in the Premier League era have done. They built a couple of teams and sustained success. I would say that they're definitely back up there. I mean, Man City's points total probably tells you that they aren't 100%. And even at times this year, Leeds did a number on them. United did a number on them as well. I think we say this every year, that there's a few teams that you think are going to push on as well. Liverpool have to push on next year if they're going to compete, Chelsea and United. But I do often think that over the course of the season that does even itself out. But I think it's massive for them getting Champions League and the confidence that win will give them. And obviously Jurgen Klopp's going nowhere. He's there to stay. And with Liverpool, if they get a couple of signings right, they have the goalkeeper, they have the attacking quality up front. Whether they add to that, whether Jota obviously is a year more experienced, but I definitely think that there's a target on their back in a way that teams know they can beat them now, and they know probably how to beat them. But it's a different kettle of fish when there's 40, 50,000 at Anfield roaring them on. But what Liverpool have done this year is pretty special in the last few weeks. You can't hold them against that. Although, to be fair to Leicester, their fixture list at the end of every season under Rodgers really hasn't helped them. And I fell for Brendan Rodgers in the end, because how often is the FA Cup played before the league campaign, which obviously derailed them. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's a tough one for Leicester, and I take your point on the fixtures, but and they've had in this season. I'm not sure about last season from memory, but this season they were blighted by injuries throughout the season. And you mentioned a couple of players, the likes of Tielemans and Ndidi, that could have gotten your Premier League team of the year had they got a full run of the campaign, or just had Leicester kept that momentum throughout the season. And I know it's not just everyone's harping on about the Newcastle home defeat 4-2 a couple of weeks ago, but there were times in the middle of the season, just like I think they'd beaten City and they just end up losing at home to someone. I don't think they're home form.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of unforgivable defeats there that. You mentioned Brendan Rodgers, his question mark over Europe. I guess for a man that was so good at getting Celtic winning those games, you know what I mean? When you're you're the odds-on favourites. When Leicester were odds-on at home, they never seemed to get it done, and you never were confident in them at home. Is this like a big loss? Because I was trying to piece it together today with Leicester City, in the sense that this can go one of two ways, where lads, we're not quite ready for Champions League, and this season proved it. Or is it the case that, Jesus Christ, we've had 2 absolute sitters missed on Champions League football that just won't come around next year if like for argument's sake, Arsenal get their house in order. I don't know about Spurs getting their house in order, but there's teams that can get their house in order very quickly. And suddenly Leicester are the 5th, 6th, 7th team of the year, considering they had Europa League football. So while like this season is definitely improving on last season, not just because of the FA Cup, which I agree with you, like winning the FA Cup is timeless. And to be fair, given a choice, I think I'd go for the FA Cup. But is this like a massive, massive loss for Leicester City? Even considering that they had Spurs beat a very Spurs team not playing for anything, and they just threw it away with Kasper Schmeichel, who was arguably the man of the match in the FA Cup final, like just making a clanger that just these things don't normally happen.
Yeah, like well, Leicester, I mean, you can't really. It's like Liverpool, and Liverpool, finally found a way over their injury problems. But I think Leicester is probably a couple of injuries too much. Johnny Evans leaving at that end of the season where you need results. I mean, what the thing with Liverpool is they've kind of had a bit of time for Phillips and Williams to play together. I mean, they've used a lot of defenders, but they've kind of found something. I think for Leicester losing Evans, especially in the cup final, but for the Chelsea game and the Tottenham game was huge for them. James Justin has missed so much of the season. Harvey Barnes as well, I think, is a massive, massive loss for them. And I think they've really struggled with that, with injuries. I'm not sure what happened. I didn't watch the Leicester game. Obviously, I've seen a few of the goals. The defending looked all over the place. So Soyuncu didn't quite have his best game. I know Fofana came off or whatever, and I'm not sure where Leicester go from here. I still think they're going to be up there. They're in the Europa League. I'm sure Brendan will want a good crack at the Europa League. He's had a few issues in the past with finishing out seasons. People maybe look back at Steven Gerrard's slip and think they could have won the title, and then dropping points to Palace last year, losing to United on the last day. But I think Leicester and Rodgers have set standards for themselves that are just ridiculously high, and they have been outstanding this year again, and they've been very unfortunate. All sides lose games this year, especially, but you can't help but think if there was fans in the King Power as well. There's a couple of those games that you're right, they do stick out, and it's very disappointing for them as well. But fair play to Tottenham, because Harry Kane wanted his golden boot, and Leicester were basically up against that, and it's incredible what he's done. Golden boot and the top assist maker in the league. It's very disappointing for Leicester, especially considering that they didn't make Chelsea really work for it in the end, and I think that's what will disappoint Rodgers the most. Considering Chelsea didn't get what they needed to get out of Villa, but they still made it. I think that's what they call hard to light a day, that they'll look back at that.
Yeah, the final thing on Leicester, because I know we're stuck for time, we want to cover as many teams as possible. FA Cup or top four? Is that a simple answer for you if you had a choice?
It depends what time, or depends what team it is or what side, and if a team's in kind of a transitionary mode. But definitely for that Leicester side, cup 100%. They'd never won it before. So many close misses. But maybe for a side, for Tottenham, I would say FA Cup. Probably for an Arsenal or a Liverpool. If you gave Liverpool that option this year, top four of the FA Cup, I'm guaranteed they'll take the top four. I'm sure Arsenal would. It all depends on the club and what kind of stage the side are in. But for Leicester, no doubt FA Cup.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on to who was the third team? Chelsea. Yes, Chelsea and Thomas Tuchel. Have the wheels come off of the Thomas Tuchel bandwagon already? You could look at it one or two ways. The first way, the pretty simple way of looking at it, they lost an FA Cup final and they lost to Aston Villa. Essentially, like Leicester getting the hard time for quote unquote choking or bottling it, but in reality, Chelsea also did as well. Or you could look at the other way, where Chelsea, dominated possession against both Leicester and Villa. Things didn't quite happen. They're probably lacking that striker at the moment, despite the fact they spent an absolute fortune on Timo Werner and a few other strikers and attacking players as well. I read somewhere Joe Willox scored more, that would be top scorer at Chelsea if he was playing for Chelsea. What way are you kind of looking at Thomas Tuchel? Like, from people like fancying Chelsea against City in the Champions League final, while not much has changed in the sense of the two teams, it feels like momentum has shifted big time, where I think it'd be a massive upset all of a sudden for Chelsea to beat City. But looking at Thomas Tuchel, maybe first of all, are we reading too much into those two games, or did we overreact on his basis? Because I know you mentioned he you wish he had him at Arsenal and all that, and I know he's only had the second half of the season, but I'm sure Arsenal are only like 5 or 6 points off that.
Yeah, but I think the thing with Chelsea is, I think we tend to always overreact with Chelsea anyway, because that's the nature of the club. They overreact themselves in the transfer window, in sacking managers. So it does feel like, Thomas Tuchel, you could label him as anywhere from a Gus Hiddink coming in for 6-8 months steadying the ship, to a Di Matteo winning a couple of cups. But I definitely think he's a top manager and he's an elite coach. I think there's the proof's in the pudding. I definitely think that Chelsea have a really good squad depth of good players, but I don't think they're still lacking something. I like Jorginho. I think he's played very well recently. But when Kante is injured or he's not playing, and Kovacic comes in, I think he got Chelsea's Player of the Year last year, but I'm not sure how well that's going to work under Tuchel. And I do think that they may go in the market for a centre mid, that real powerhouse that, someone like a Basuma at Brighton. Certainly, I'm sure will be on their radar. I didn't watch. I watched the highlights of the Chelsea game. It just looked so erratic. Everything just looked stretched. They looked under the cosh. The atmosphere at Villa Park was electric. It's a proper football stadium, and they've had a really good year, Villa, as well. But there's something disappointing about that Chelsea, the finish to it. And you mentioned it there. Joe Willock scored 7 goals in the last 7 games. Jorginho scored 7 penalties. He's the top scorer. I think, Willock's got another goal as well, so he'd be their top scorer. It's just bizarre for a club like Chelsea that's always had a potent goal threat, or a Diego Costa or a Drogba, someone you can hang your hat on. But I'm not sure. The more I look at this Timo Werner experiment, the more you wonder what's going to happen. Is he going to have that second?
Sad, isn't it? Very sad.
Is he going to have that second season where he just ignites? And Havertz has shown glimpses in the last few months, but it's a big transfer window. There's a few things I don't think Tuchel's done well. I think the Tammy Abraham situation is an absolute mess.
Just on that, would you I know we had Connor Swords, Chelsea fan. You're obviously, when you hear it's a fan, particularly, like, we wouldn't follow as much Chelsea as other clubs. He's big on keeping Tammy Abraham. I don't know, that's only a small sample, but would you have pushed Tammy Abraham in, or you feel that he's kind of been not treated correctly by Chelsea because they've spent so much money on Timo Werner and he's the answer because he has to be the answer?
Well, even whether you think he should be in the team or not, I think when you've had someone who's clumbed through the Chelsea academy ranks, who's done well for Chelsea, I know a few people aren't the biggest Tammy Abraham fans, but he scores goals and managed everywhere he's done. Gone back to his loan at Bristol City, his time at Swansea in the Premier League was probably a little bit early for him. Went back to Villa in the Championship, helped them get promoted through the playoffs. I just don't like the way it's been handled. He's spoken openly about Kepa being his cup goalkeeper and playing players because it's a cup, and he just hasn't really kept with that for Tammy Abraham. And for Abraham not to be in the lineup or in the squad for the final, I thought was a real kick in the teeth. And it does feel like, I think it's a real Mourinho play. When Mourinho doesn't like a player or he doesn't fancy him, he kind of belittles him and does things that, the easiest thing for Tuchel to do is put Tammy on the bench, and even if he doesn't play him, he's on the bench. But I think it is that Mourinho power play, and he did it to Hudson-Odoi at Southampton when he brought him on and subbed him off, and a couple of times he hasn't even played Hudson-Odoi in recent months.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. That's forgotten about. I remember being very surprised at the time, and I don't think a huge amount was made of it. But that's a good point, and forgotten about that. He seems rootless, but in this day and age, maybe going too much Jose Mourinho maybe won't do you any favors, and particularly those 2 young players that he's done it to.
Yeah, I think that's the key. He's done it to 2 of the Chelsea's academy boys, something that the Frank regime was all about. These guys came to the fore. Tammy Abraham became Chelsea's number 9. But it does feel a bit weird what's happened there, and it's something very much to watch. I think wherever Tammy goes, I think someone's getting a top quality striker. I think he'll fit the bill at West Ham. And I know he's an Arsenal fan growing up. I'm sure Arsenal would take him, but he scores goals wherever he's gone, really. And I think if you're him, you're massively frustrated you're not in that England squad, because at the end of the season, and especially with how some of the strikers have finished up this year, with Ings being injured, and Calvert-Lewin's the number 2 now. Could he have forced his way in as the 3rd choice striker? I'm sure he could have if he got a run of games, but there's absolutely no chance now with how little he's played. And and it's not as if Chelsea shoot the lights out every game. I mean, their goal return under Tuchel is not good. But it's definitely something to watch out for, because it's very noticeable that something has happened there with Tammy Abraham, and I don't like the way Tuchel's handled it, even the way he at times he's spoken in the media. And I don't know why that. I mean, this Kepa playing a few league games here, and I know Mendy I think came off, and that'd be a massive worry. And you can look at it now and go, well, at least he's played a few games, or you can look at it and go, Kepa's going to be in goal. The £70 million pony that's happened for Chelsea, but
yeah, I know a lot of Chelsea fans are just taking it on the Kepa thing.
I'd be fancying Willie Caballero in goal, but anyway, there's a few things that Tuchel's gone wrong that you really want to look at next month, and you also have to remember the club he's at. It's a very reactionary club. Everything just seems to happen at a million miles an hour there, and it'll be a big summer. And whether he gets backed, because Chelsea obviously have the money, but they spent big last summer, hasn't quite happened. I think it's a blessing he's got Champions League football, and there'll be a massive weight off his shoulders.
Yeah, let's move on quickly to Manchester United, and then we've Arsenal to cover, maybe a bit of Spurs with the Harry Kane situation. Interesting, you weren't too happy with Gary Neville. He kind of wrote back on his interview with Harry Kane, which is already in the public domain, if that makes sense. I guess reading between the lines, was he saying people were twisting his words, or when I say his words, Harry Kane's words? Yeah, I don't know. It was a bizarre comment, and you've mentioned this to me before. We might spend maybe 2 or 3 minutes and briefly cover Arsenal here, but it seems to me that he's completely contradicting themselves by trying to get United to sign Harry Kane and if that was happening to Paul Pogba. Yeah, I'm very disappointed in Gary Neville now, I have to say, and probably I'm not as disappointed as you are with Harry Kane, to be fair, but maybe you might enlighten us on why you are disappointed with him as well.
No, but I just feel sorry for Tottenham and all this. Probably not Daniel Levy, because I think it really strengthens his hand, because if Harry Kane wants to go, he's going to get top book. If he stays, Tottenham fans say, well, we kept him. But, the fans at the end of the day, and, Tottenham got 7th. But to do that, for it all to happen a couple of days before, bearing in mind, England have a massive Euros, and Gareth Southgate's going to be answering questions on it. He's the England captain. He's the person, if they are to win the Euros, which, a lot of people have favourites for, he's going to play a massive role. But you are asking yourself, why is Gary Neville interviewing it? Why are Sky reporting all this a couple of weeks ago? And it doesn't look great to the naked eye. But yeah, that's showbiz, as Eamon Dunphy would say. I see he's an interview out with Gary Neville. But I think the thing about it is we're probably, or Gary Maguire, we're all probably going to watch it. So that's
sorry. Did you? I thought you said Dunphy had an interview with Gary Neville there.
No.
But I did see that it's the overlap, which has had Richard Scudamore, which has had Harry Kane, and which has had
Harry Maguire.
Harry Maguire, yeah, which is coming out soon. Which I guess they seem pre-recorded, so I guess there's a few more big names to come. It doesn't. Yeah. I guess maybe unfortunate time you could look at it, but Harry Kane.
I definitely think that there is an air of hypocrisy, and it's happening to Tottenham. If it was happening to a Liverpool or a United or an Arsenal, maybe a bigger club, that there would be a lot more said about it. And if it was a Martial doing this, or someone else doing this, there'd probably be a bit more said.
Yeah, maybe the final 2 minutes of this Premier League coverage is James Moe, a Tottenham fan, who gave up supporting Tottenham. Check out our recent tweet and Instagram. Says, bigger club, this lad. Just quoting you, Sean. Happy post saying Arsenal's day, lads. Sean, would you rather Europa Conference League or finish behind Tottenham? Because that's ultimately the choice that Arsenal had in the end.
Finishing. I think it was the ideal thing, because Arsenal won, so the fans are happy. Arsenal played pretty well at times, but they don't have to play in the Conference League. I think it's an absolute blessing. Yeah, there's nothing to shout about if you're Tottenham. I mean, you finish 7th and Arsenal finish 8th. It's the Conference League, which
the comment for podcast listeners is 5 years in a row. James says, but finishing ahead of Arsenal.
But some of the teams in the Conference League is actually, when you think about it, shambolic that some of those teams will play in Europe. But that's money, and I'm sure we can go down a loophole of that. But I think definitely, I think it's a bonus that Arsenal aren't in top 4. But I think it also makes the owners have to spend money, because especially with the with what's happened and the protests and stuff. For Arsenal not to be in Europe after 25 years is a massive kick in the teeth. And when the club has gone, I don't think it's a bad thing that Arsenal are out and can focus just on the league, and it just makes you have a smaller squad as well. You don't you can't just say, oh, we're having someone to play in the Europa League or the Conference League. I think if leave the cup games to some of the kids and just have a smaller squad.
Absolutely. About 15 seconds left on the football, but yeah, in fairness, Arsenal have fallen a long way. That Spurs can finish ahead of Arsenal 5 years in a row, to be fair. But look, we're gonna move on to GA quick swiftly before we get down that rabbit hole. Allianz National Leagues, Sean, how impressed were you with Kerry or Dublin in that game? It was obviously teams are rusty, and in fairness, a lot of the counties have played this week. They've only been training 4 or 5 weeks. I thought the football overall was so attacking, was brilliant. It reminded me a small bit of the Premier League coming back this season and the start of the season where there was just goals. Do you remember that? And I did get a sense that was a little bit of GAA, and I know they had it last year. I just guessed they were almost, they had the championship come off. They didn't, they were just finishing the league. This year, they had a bit of time to work. I just feel like with the lack of preseason, it just feels like a little bit fake in terms of the amount of scores being had. However, it's great seeing teams playing attacking, and I guess they're all looking at a view to Dublin. I just thought the Donegal Monaghan, and I was like, here's 2 teams here that are trying to find a way to get enough scores to beat Dublin. And maybe take the Kerry Dublin game first. It was brilliant having the top 2 teams drawn against each other in a group in the Allianz League, and hopefully we get to see them in the league semi-final or final. But if not, the draw dictates that they'll be playing each other in the All-Ireland final if both those teams get there.
Yeah, I think you can look at it a few ways. I think as a Gaelic football viewer or a fan or someone who goes to games, I think you've become so used to things happening, and especially for the first 20 minutes when I was saying this is such a poor standard of football at times. The amount of wides, there were so many bad kick passes, there were so many balls given away, and I think what we've seen in Gaelic over the last few years is, limit the risk. Risk is gone out the game. There's no outside of the boot passes that Niall Scully, for example, played into Conor Callaghan. And I think, for the weaker of the game, really for the less of the game, but certainly in that game, there was a lot of, handling errors. There was bad passes. There was rustiness, a couple of injuries. But definitely the spectacle in the second half was as good as game you can probably get without crowds in terms of end to end. Both sides could have won it at the end. Both sides probably should have won it. Felt they probably should win it. But it's clear that, Kerry is very much orientated around their inside forward line, and it's similar with Dublin. And I think there's a lot of people tweeting and saying that, I don't think, we're living in an era where you've Conor Callaghan and David Clifford, probably up there with 2 of the greatest forwards the game will probably ever see, and you have them both at the same time, whereas before maybe you had a Cullum Cooper, and going back then you had a Maurice Fitzgerald, and you break it up into years, but it does feel like these 2 are in and around the same age at the same start of their career. Obviously, one has won a couple of All-Irelands, one was Kerry captain, and won a couple of club championships, had an unbelievable time of it at underage, and it does feel like they're trading punch for punch, really, and I'd imagine one of them is going to be league candidate for player of the year or certainly all-star awards. And I suppose I can't, when you think of it, you could probably liken it to the Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson era in golf, when the 2 of them went head for head in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think it's very much like that at the moment.
I actually think it's very similar to the Messi Ronaldo. I know that's a lazy comparison, but I do get the sense that David Clifford's the Messi and Conor Callaghan's the Ronaldo. Like Conor Callaghan, the way he's such an athlete, like way he can fend off players is just unparalleled. Whereas David Clifford, despite the fact he has size, and that's a big factor, I don't think it is it's just the way his movement, his little skills, his rifle finishes over the bar, his left foot finishes over the bar. For him to live up to his billing so early, like he scored 4 goals in an All-Ireland minor final, and that's all everyone was talking about after the All-Ireland senior final, despite the fact it was one of the best All-Ireland finals ever played from memory. Serve me correctly, I think it was the 2017 All-Ireland final. Yet everyone was talking about David Clifford, this minor lad. Like, imagine that. First of all, imagine that happening in any other sport. Do you know what I mean? FA Cup final, oh yeah, great final, probably best final ever. But did you not see Yeah, could you not see your man in the Youth Cup score 4 goals? Do you know what I mean? I don't think it'd be talked like that, but GAA just has this great relationship with minors in the sense that minor has such a standing, which is on another topic is why I'm so conflicted sometimes, where I personally think, the B Championship should be before the All-Ireland, but it's such a great tradition. But David Clifford is just, like, I don't think Joe Brawley's exaggerating when he says he's unmarkable, and like he doesn't even have the best game. And you look, he scored 1-6, 3 or 4 or 5 from play, and you're like, Jesus, this guy's incredible. And what he does for that Kerry team, and I do genuinely think they have a cracking chance at this year's All Ireland, and I do think they would have put it right up to Dublin. I mean, they overthought everything. I'm surprised Peter Keane survived that. I thought that defeat to Cork was unforgivable. But they're really primed this year, and if they do get through a tough All-Ireland semi-final, they'll easily win Munster. We're set for an absolutely epic All-Ireland final, and I do think Kerry, surely they can win it this year based on not just having those incredible forwards, but like surely a bit of motivation is worth 1%. Like, how is this Dublin team still so motivated and so rootless to go and win for some of them, like James McCarthy, Stephen Cluxton, a 9th All-Ireland title? David Clifford's looking for his first. Sean O'Shea's looking for his first. Like Kerry could this Kerry team in 5 years could have 3 or 4 All-Irelands, or this Kerry team could be the new Mayo, where they've had 2 or 3 or 4 great battles with Dublin. It could just go either way, which is why this rivalry, like it often does in GAA, could possibly save the Gaelic Football Championship, because without this Kerry team, none of the teams are anywhere near Dublin's level. In fact, I think it's so dominant that Dublin and Kerry are so far ahead. Dublin slightly ahead of Kerry, obviously, but we're set in for an epic All-Ireland final, hopefully, if Kerry can get there. But then you look at the likes of Donegal, Tyrone, and on their day, even a Monaghan could probably beat Kerry, which is the frustrating thing for a neutral who wants to see Dublin challenged by the second best team in the country in an All-Ireland final, again, like we had in 2019. Just muted your mic there, Sean. But yeah, like Dublin Kerry 2019 All-Ireland final, let's hope we get that in 2021.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you perfect, loud and clear. Let's go.
I think the thing is, if you're a Sean Bugler or a Conor Callahan a couple of years ago coming into the Dublin setup, you've got guys who've been there, done it, who've won countless All Ireland, who are you're pushing on the whole time. The one thing I would say about that Kerry team is probably bar David Moore and a couple more, they've a real lack of experience. And I think obviously experience can be an underrated quality, can be an overrated quality, but I think it's a quality. And especially in that back line, I mean, it just looks so timid. I think probably Tyg Morley's the most experienced, Paul Murphy, captain, but it doesn't have that big powerhouse defender that, you go back in that Kerry teams of years gone by, and you think of someone like Seamus Moynihan at the back, or some of the great defenders they've had over the years, or a Tomas or a Mark O'Shea or someone. They haven't got a marquee defender, and when Dublin have as many forwards as they do and as many quality potent forwards as they do, I don't really see it. And for Kerry, they just look so open at times. And Dublin had a couple of other chances where, Paddy Small had one where he shot, where he could have easily passed for another goal. And I just think on their day, I think if Dublin get their decision making right against the Kerry, they've no hope. Kerry do.
Just on this point from comment from McDarragh saying Kerry have no chance of getting to a final with Moore in midfield. I know during the game there was a lot of commentary on Twitter and from people I know that it's David Moore, and you mentioned the experience there. Is he still at that level to compete with Dublin? No. Yeah, and it's a lot of people were saying that as well.
You could tell obviously it's hard because it's early on in the National League, and the league is the league, but he didn't really look up to the pace. And I think with him, I remember being at the Mayo game, a couple of years ago, probably feels like longer, but in Fitzgerald Stadium in the Super 8s, and he was unbelievable that day. From the minute one, you could tell he was up for it. You remember the pushing and shoving at the throw in, and I think he kicked a couple of fine points, and he has that game in him, but I think his fitness level at the moment, he doesn't look up to scratch. He gives too many balls away with Hanley in possession. Obviously, you can go back to the 5 in a row final, or you can look at some of the kick passes they gave wide. And when you've such a potent forward in David Clifford, and when you've someone like that, where a defender is never going to gamble, they're going to let David Clifford get the ball. That every defender in the country is going to let David Clifford get the ball. They're not going to put too much pressure on, because if they know they put pressure on and he beats them, it's game over. So it must be a dream playing with David Clifford as a midfielder, because all I have to do is find a bit of space, pop it into him, because no defender is going to compete for that first ball or the first challenge on the ball from Clifford. And just how many times Kerry give the ball away stupidly with a defender just coming across for Dublin, picking it up, Merchant a lot of times. But I think if Kerry had a Johnny Cooper, I think I'd give them a way more of a chance. I think, people like Jack Barry, I thought Damon O'Connor played very well in midfield for Kerry. Good young player.
I was actually going to bring him up. I haven't written down some great fetches. That Dublin kick out he won, I didn't think it was the worst kick out in the world, and he leaped in high and managed to intercept it, and they got a score off it. I do think they have kind of those kind of players coming through that they can really give it a pop. Like, I'll be banging this Kerry drum for a while, like, insane. I think they were right at Dublin level, and I know Dublin got the goals there. Kerry were very open, but surely maybe they overthought the defensive system this year. Let's hope they don't. Well, for the neutral anyway, they don't underthink the defensive system this year.
But they've a reason. There's a reason they've overthought the defensive system, because their defense is so vulnerable, and I think that game proved it. So when you have a vulnerable defense, your immediate reaction is to go, let's defend, where potentially it could be let's all out attack, let's score as many as the opposition, let's give the ball into David Clifford and Sean O'Shea and hope they have 100% strike rate. And the amount of wides both sides had, I mean, there could have been cricket scores the two teams racked up. But for Dublin, to be honest, I love Niall Scully. I think he's a brilliant player. I think he had a brilliant game, but I don't know how he ended up with man of the match, and I think he could become one of these players that is so underrated. He's actually overrated now. I'm not saying he is at the moment, but
I know what you're saying.
Everyone now knows about him. Everyone understands.
He was as shocked as everyone, I think. Yeah, he was as shocked when he got the reward.
But he's such an
final word on this game. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, he's such an underrated player, and that I think he's like Stephen O'Brien for Kerry, in that role. But when they have a good game, and they have a couple of good games, and everyone's talking about them, I think they become bigger than what they are. But no, Scully was brilliant again. And example of the game being a different game to what we've seen over Dublin Kerry in a few years was that pass of Scully for Con's goal, where I think Paul Murphy gets lost in the bounce. We don't see that really enough in the game, and because if Scully kicks that away and Kerry go up and get a goal or a point, everyone's looking at it in the team analysis video going, why are you doing that? So I don't think it's a bad thing, but our eyes have changed so much now that when we see a bad kick pass, you're going, why don't you just create a possession for 2 or 3 minutes and kick a few scores?
Yeah, I did. We're going to move on, but just a final point in that game. I think Paul Murphy burst Brian Fenton, left him for dead. And I know he's had a bad angle, but Jesus, another hopping solo, either give a little nudge to Fenton and then bury the ball in the back of the net for Kerry in that second half. You might win the game. It's just that bit of ruthlessness they lack. And seeing Brian Fenton going that way, you don't see it often. And I think he was gassed for that particular attack. And Paul Murphy just put it over the bar. So that's the difference. I do think Dublin are ruthless. And one person we have to mention is Cormac Costello, absolutely superb. The way he stepped in, I don't know if he's going to play and Dean Rock can play in the same team in the championship. Who knows? But what he's done first 2 games, in fairness to him, fair play to him. He's come back with a ruthlessness. Obviously, he was involved in that training session. Shows I know that he shouldn't be in there, but how determined he was to make an impact in Dublin. But I want to talk before we move on to maybe the other division. The other Division 1 counties, like Donegal, Monaghan. I want to give a special mention to Rian O'Neill, who I remember talking about a couple of years ago. And I don't know if he quite lived up to the hype, but I thought he was absolutely excellent against Tyrone. And he set up both their goals and would have had a hat-trick of assists for goals, only because he got fouled for the penalty. Only Armagh missed the penalty, which would have put them 4 up. And they ended up losing the game, but I think it was a 5 in the end. Like, they just threw it away. And it's so unlike a Kieran McGeeney, not side necessarily, because they have done this before, but like a Kieran McGeeney player would have seen that game out. Do you know what I mean? And if they can they're beating Tyrone here, they have a chance to go 2 wins out of 2, progress to a league semi-final. If they can just learn to see out those games, like they had Mayo beat a couple of years ago. I think Mayo ended up in the All-Ireland semi-final against Dublin. They have the players, like the 2 O'Neill brothers, Rian O'Neill, that at 11. They've a few good forwards in there. This is all without Jamie Clark. Like they have a bit of a squeak at Ulster this year, and if you win Ulster, then you're in an All-Ireland semi-final. Like, they're in a mini Ulster championship now with Division 1 North, just the way it works out. But I have to give a special mention to Rian O'Neill. I thought he was absolutely immense against Tyrone.
Yeah, and we've spoken before. Obviously, comes some good stock up in Cross McGlen. His uncle is Oisin McConville. You don't get sort of better football in pedigree than that, especially up in that part of the island. You know, I think it's a little bit like Mayo. When it happens so often, you got to question why it does happen so often. And I didn't watch the game, but I was following it, and I remember going, "Geez, Armagh, great result for Armagh. This could be." And they just didn't quite see it out, and you would wonder what's happening there. Obviously, you have to give a mention as well this weekend to Conor McCarthy from Monaghan. Scoring a hat trick. I know Joe Brolly wasn't impressed with his interview after the
Hat
game.
trick, hat trick in 20 minutes as well.
Yeah, and I know people aren't happy with his interview as well, but it's just part of the game now. But yeah, look, there's so much talent. Like I always think, I do think some managers when they come out, I think cry wolf a lot, saying we don't have players and we don't have this and we don't have the resource and that. I think there's so many good footballers up and down the country. You've just got to, in so many counties, you look at some of the players that are coming through at minor, especially I think of a county like Meath who are producing unbelievable athletes at under 17s, at minor 21s or 20s level.
Just on this point before you make it, I know Kieran Whelan, he did an interview where, I might have brought this up with you before, where he kind of said a lot of things that weren't right in my opinion. But one thing he did say was Meath senior team should be putting up a better fight to Dublin senior team based on those players they have coming through. Would that be a fair thing to say, or is that very harsh?
And I just don't think it's Meath. I think it's Cork. You look at some of the under 20 teams Cork have produced in both codes, and I just think with some of those managements, I just think some of them are just so far up their own hole. They think they're managing something that they probably aren't. And I just think there's so many underachieving counties. When you look at the footballers they produce, they just need to do away with a lot of what they are, and just find and play the most natural forwards and the most natural players, and find a way of winning games and giving teams a right crack, because so many teams at the moment are limping out the back door, losing, happy to lose to some counties by 4 or 5 points, or in other cases 11 or 12, and they're not really giving it a right crack. And I think it's unfair on some of the players who could look back in 10 or 15 years time, and if we don't know what the football and landscape's going to be, but if it's a lot more competitive and teams are playing in a different way and becoming more competitive, I think players will look back with a lot of regret. And I just think teams need to go out and give it a proper go. And there's so many natural footballers in this country. I think you only have to look at some of the club games that are played and some of the club teams that are produced. I mean, you look at Galway and what Corofin play and the football they play, and especially under Kevin Walsh, the football that Galway played was just embarrassing, really. I mean, it was tough to watch. But that's what I mean. You go to Galway and there's so many natural footballers. They got to an All-Ireland final at minor a few years ago. And you just think, just put them out. Just put them out like a club side. Put them out with a lot of quality, and put them out with natural forwards.
I'll be honest with you. I completely agree with you. Is it just too simplistic to say like Kevin Walsh is, but just before, like, he's a very respected coach. Like, I know Pork Joyce is trying to bring that attacking style to play with Galway, hasn't done it yet. Although I think they, with the knockout championship didn't suit them last year, but they haven't got going this year. And he's trying to bring that football now. Whether that's a legacy issue with Kevin Walsh, but I know you're saying these managers too far to up their own hole. Like, but like Kevin Walsh is like a respected inter-county manager. Like, surely he's trying to find the best way to beat the likes of Dublin or Kerry.
Yeah, I'm not saying play like this and Fermanagh are going to beat Dublin or Laois are going to play Dublin, but you're going to find your way a lot more up to divisions, and it's a more exciting game for the players to play. There's more excitement in supporting their county. There's more pride in supporting their county. You look at some of the great Ulster counties like Derry and Down. I mean, Derry played Dublin in a league final, less than 10 years ago.
Worst game I was at, I think. Well, not the league final, but the league game. But I take your point.
4 years on, and they're nowhere, and they're playing. I think they're trying to change at the moment, but they're playing negative football and they got relegated. I mean, how can you justify playing negative football and getting relegated? I mean, you look at every team now, especially I know it's a different code, but you can kind of compare it in football. How many teams are doing away with playing negative football to play a better brand of football? It might still get relegated, but at least there's a better brand. There's something to work for, and you can build your way up a little bit more. I would just
say, like, the last, because we only got a minute here, like, obviously at Burnley, like, you've kind of like would praise them. Play quote unquote negative football. Like, isn't there not a place for that in Gaelic football as well?
There obviously is a niche, but I think too many like a Jim McGuinness finding a way of getting results. But I think too many people just thought this is the way to go. This is how football should be played. But you got to move with the times. You got to find different ways. And put it this way, Dublin, Kerry, everyone knows now at the top level how to play against a blanket defence. You just work around your whole possession, you drag them out. I think it's just gone too far. And I'm not blaming Jim McGuinness or anything, but everyone is just trying to play like that.
You're blaming the copycats, basically.
No, I just think it's a fairly simple game at times. You just beat your man inside. You score 3 or 4 points each, and we'll win the game. And it's as simple as that. And I think too many teams aren't playing like that. And put it this way, you look at some of the forwards teams like Monaghan have. They should absolutely be lapping up the championship. They should be absolutely destroying teams in Ulster. They should be destroying defenders, but they aren't.
And they can't get out. They can't get past Cavan in a last year's championship. But that's it. 20 minutes. At Tackling Sports social media is where you can keep up to date with all sports content in general and the next shows. There'll be a show on Thursday night. We'll have a look probably in the league. We'll have a little think about what we're going to do there. But to keep up to date, as I said, at Tackling Sport. If you are watching on YouTube, we'd really appreciate you clicking that subscribe button or liking the video. And on your podcast platform, if you do leave a review, it would be much appreciated. Again, just helps to reach more people, and we're having great interaction on social media. I know we're having good reaction to the live videos as well. But that's it. All that's left to say is goodbye from Sean.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from myself. Enjoy the little break from Premier League. Enjoy the Europa League final that I forgot to mention to Sean during the Premier League progress. And have a great week. We'll chat to you on Thursday.